Her laughter was the loudest in the room. Not just loud, sharp, like broken glass in a velvet box. Everyone else followed suit, but hers came first, and it stayed the longest. And all of it was about me. The joke hadn't even been funny. Not really. Something about how I still don't understand how to order from a menu without Googling half the words. But that wasn't what stung. It was how she looked around the table after saying it, like she expected applause. And she got it. The stem of my wine glass trembled between my fingers. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just hollow. Like someone had removed all the organs that let you fight back and replaced them with a polite smile. The woman to her left, auburn curls, eyes like she'd already judged you and moved on, leaned in and whispered something that made my wife laugh even harder. They clinked glasses. Another round of white wine. Another round of humiliation. I considered excusing myself. The bathroom, maybe. Or just walking out and never turning around. But then, Rosalie moved. She hadn't said a word all evening. Just sat there, swirling her drink, her gold earrings catching candlelight like little fires. Her gaze had been distant, not bored, not cold, just separate. And now she leaned across the table. Every voice dropped. It was like the room inhaled. Her lips hovered near my ear, and her hand brushed the inside of my wrist. Warm, deliberate. "Let's step outside," she whispered. No expression, no wink, no smile. Just 5 words that carried more electricity than anything I'd felt in years. She stood, left her half-full glass behind, and walked out the side door of the restaurant without glancing back. Danielle didn't even notice. She was mid-sentence, mocking the time I tried to hang a ceiling fan and nearly took out the dog. The room erupted again, and I followed. Out the side door, past the string lights, past the laughter, past the version of me they all thought was a joke. The air outside was cold. The kind of cold that sobers you instantly. Rosalie stood with her arms folded, not facing me. She didn't speak right away. When she did, it wasn't what I expected. "You know she's done worse, right?" My chest tightened. She turned slowly, eyes steady. "If tonight's what finally got your attention, then you haven't seen anything yet." And just like that, the glass didn't break, but I did. The moment she said those words, "You know she's done worse, right?" The cold night air somehow got colder. I stood there in that narrow alley behind the restaurant, half lit by cheap string lights and the orange flicker of a nearby heater, trying to piece together whether I was dreaming, drunk, or just finally waking up. Rosalie didn't move. Her arms were still crossed. She wasn't trying to comfort me. She wasn't even looking for a reaction. She just wanted me to hear it. Like she'd been holding it in for too long, and this moment, my wife turning me into a joke in front of 10 people, was finally enough. "I don't understand," I said, though I did. Somewhere deep in my gut, I already knew what she meant. I just wasn't ready for the shape of it. Rosalie finally turned to me. Her lipstick had barely smudged from her wine glass, but her expression was tighter now. Not angry, not bitter. Something colder than that, like disappointment wearing a silk dress. "You ever heard her talk when she thinks you've left the room?" she asked. "No, of course not. You're too trusting. That's your problem. Always have been." My mouth was dry, but I forced the words out. "What are you talking about, Rosalie?" She exhaled, almost annoyed. "Last month. The party at Gavin's. You left early because you had that migraine, remember?" I nodded slowly. I remembered. Danica insisted we go, even though I felt like my skull was splitting open. I told her I'd Uber home, and she could stay as long as she wanted. She kissed my forehead, told me she loved me, said she'd be back before midnight. She didn't come back at midnight, did she? Rosalie asked, almost rhetorically. "She came back at 3. I blinked. "You were there?" She was talking to Nolan. And Reese. In the hallway. She thought I was outside. They were drinking tequila straight from the bottle, like it was college again. She was laughing about you. But not in that way she does at dinner, when she plays it off as banter. No, this was real. Raw. Mean. "What did she say?" I asked, afraid to actually know. Rosalie looked away for the first time. "She said you were safe. That she used to find that charming, but now it felt like dating a wall. That even your voice made her skin itch sometimes." My throat closed. It wasn't just the cruelty of it, it was the casualness. Like I was a pair of shoes she regretted buying. "But the worst part," she continued, "was when Nolan asked if she was ever tempted. She didn't say no. She said, define tempted. Then she mentioned 2 names. I felt something inside me drop, like a floor had opened under my ribs. Who? I asked, voice barely audible. Rosalie held up a hand. Don't. Not yet. You're not ready. And I don't say that to be dramatic. I say that because I know how you love her. And I know how bad it's going to hurt when you realize it's not just words. I staggered back a step, more out of instinct than choice. A car passed by on the street behind us, its headlights slicing the alley in two before disappearing. I came out here tonight to breathe, she said, quieter now. But when I saw the way she was performing you, like a clown act, I couldn't stay silent anymore. I rubbed my hands over my face. I felt heat rise in my eyes, but no tears came. Just pressure. Heavy, sharp pressure behind the sockets. Why tell me now? I asked. Rosalie's answer came fast. Because I saw your face tonight. I saw you dying inside. And I've seen it for months. And because someone should at least tell you the truth, since she clearly won't. She stepped closer, and for a second I thought she might reach for my hand or put her arm around me. But she didn't. She just looked me in the eyes and said, "You deserve better than being the setup for her punchlines." Then she turned and walked back toward the restaurant. I didn't follow. Not yet. I stayed in that alley for a long time, staring at the cracks in the pavement, wondering what was worse, that I'd been mocked so publicly, or that I might have only just begun to see who my wife truly was when no one was watching. I didn't go back inside the restaurant. Not after what Rosalie told me. I lingered in that alley for nearly 20 minutes, the back of my throat burning with words I didn't know how to say. I stared at the bricks like they might shift and show me something I missed. A sign, a clue, anything. But all I had was her voice echoing in my head. She's done worse. And those two names she hadn't told me yet, dangling in silence like blades. When I finally walked to the front of the building, I saw Danica through the tall windows, laughing again. She had her hand on the shoulder of some guy I didn't recognize. His arm was draped lazily behind her chair. Everyone looked completely unbothered by my absence, as if I were never there to begin with. I didn't go in. Instead, I walked to the edge of the parking lot and sat inside my car with the engine off. The silence was thick. My phone lit up once, a text from Danica. Just 3 words. "Where'd you go?" No question mark. I didn't answer. I drove home. And when I walked into the house, something changed. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was calculation. Like the part of me that had been trying for years to rationalize her indifference had finally stepped aside and let something colder take over. That night, while she was still out, I opened her laptop. I'd never done that before. Not in our entire marriage. It always felt like crossing a line. Like betraying the very trust one was always accused of lacking. But I wasn't after her secrets. I was after mine. What I found wasn't dramatic. No explicit messages. No scandalous photos. Just patterns. A calendar entry marked Tuesday, workout, late, repeated every week for the last 3 months. I opened her browser history from those nights. DoorDash receipts. A few YouTube videos. But no gym. No GPS history either. Like she wasn't even in motion, just somewhere with the lights off and time to kill. Then I found the hidden folder. It wasn't password protected, just tucked away under an innocuous name. Invoices. Inside were screenshots. Notes. Scanned receipts. A photo of a hotel room with a view I didn't recognize. A note typed in her own voice. And this I remember word for word. He thinks I'm at Pilates. I'm drinking Chardonnay in a king bed watching trash TV. No makeup. No pressure. Just me. Finally. The timestamp was from last month. One of those workout late Tuesdays. Another note followed. If he finds out, I'll tell him it was just one night. Even though it wasn't. It never is. I didn't realize I was shaking until I heard the front door. Danica was home. I slammed the laptop shut and rushed to the kitchen. Pretended I was grabbing water. She walked in humming something, smelling like lemon and dry white wine. She kissed my cheek without even looking at me, dropped her heels by the door, and asked how the rest of dinner was. I told her I got a stomach ache and left early. She nodded, already scrolling through her phone, not even pretending to care. We went to bed like normal. She was asleep within minutes. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the phrase, "it never is," crawling across the drywall like it had legs. I didn't sleep. And in the morning, I texted Rosalie. "I'm ready. Tell me their names." When her reply came, it wasn't a message, it was a photo. No words. Just an image. It was blurry but unmistakable. A parking garage, one of those tight, gray concrete boxes with fluorescent lights and oil stains in every corner. In the foreground, Danika's hand was pressed against a car window. Not our car. A black Lexus SUV. In the reflection of the window, barely visible, was her face, mouth open, eyes half closed, and behind her, a man's arm wrapped around her waist. No shirts. No ambiguity. I stared at the image until the phone screen dimmed out. When I brought the screen back to life, a second photo had arrived. A close-up. Their faces were clearer now. The man's name, I'd recognize it anywhere. Reese. The same Reese from Gavin's party. The same one Danica once insisted was just a co-worker with too much cologne and not enough tact. I'd shaken his hand. He'd been in our home. We'd all eaten sushi together on our living room floor after a concert once. I remember him complimenting our wedding photo and joking, "You clean up nice, Elric." I thought it was just a harmless tease. The third message came seconds later. "Rosalie, this was 1 month ago. I have more. If you want the whole file, meet me tomorrow. I won't text this stuff." I didn't reply. I couldn't. My ears were ringing. My vision tunneled. The room swam, then steadied. I closed the blinds, locked the door, sat on the edge of the bed and tried to swallow, but my throat felt like it had sealed shut. My hands were trembling again, not out of fear this time, but something harder to name. Betrayal was a word that felt too distant, too clean. This was something uglier. I should have felt rage. That hot, explosive kind you see in movies. I didn't. What I felt was quieter, but sharper, a sickening awareness that every time I had chosen to trust her, she had chosen to lie. Not in some desperate, guilty way. No, in a bored, practiced way. As if I was too pathetic to notice, and too safe to ever do anything about it if I did. The door opened. Danica walked in with a shopping bag and a smile like nothing had happened. "I got that weird honey you like. The one from Vermont with the bear on the bottle." I didn't answer. She raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" I looked at her. She looked stunning. Her makeup barely smudged, her blouse loose and elegant. She had that effortless beauty she always wielded like a weapon, and in that moment, it felt like I was staring at a stranger wearing my wife's skin. "I'm fine," I lied. "Okay," she said, already halfway to the kitchen. "Dinner in 20. Don't be weird." And then she was gone. I sat there in silence, fingers clenched so tight into my palms that I left little crescents in the skin. I didn't go to dinner. I didn't speak. I just waited. Waited for the morning. Waited for Rosalie. Waited for whatever version of hell I had just stepped into to finally show me its teeth. But deep down, I already knew. Reese was just the first name. There would be more. Rosalie didn't want to meet at a cafe, or a park, or anywhere normal. She sent me an address and a time, 9:30 a.m. sharp. It was an old bookstore 2 blocks from the university, tucked between a vape shop and a closed-down shoe repair place. The kind of place with dusty windows, handwritten signs, and the smell of paper that's been aging in the dark for decades. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a crooked wooden table near the back, wearing a denim jacket over a black tank top, dark glasses pushed up into her hair. No makeup, no greeting, just a worn manila envelope resting between her hands like it contained a loaded weapon. I sat down across from her without speaking. The chair creaked under me. The only sound in the place was the hum of a ceiling fan and the quiet shuffle of the elderly shop owner reshelving old fantasy novels 3 aisles away. Rosalie slid the envelope toward me. I didn't touch it yet. "I said I'd give you names," she said flatly. "You got one already. Reese. That one's old news." I blinked. "Old?" She nodded. "It started last year. Business trip to Portland. Ended 3 months later when she found out his wife was monitoring his texts." I swallowed hard. "He's married?" Rosalie smirked. "Aren't they all?" She leaned forward. "The ones you really want to look at are in the envelope. There's a name you'll recognize, and one you definitely won't." I opened it slowly, like it might explode. Inside were printed screenshots, 2 boarding passes, a keycard sleeve from a boutique hotel in Seattle, and a folded piece of stationery from a spa, with Danica's name written in looping cursive under a fake surname. I stared at it for a long time, like it might tell me something about who she used to be before all this. But the worst thing was the photo paperclip to the back of the spa receipt. It wasn't graphic, nothing that would break a content policy or scar a child. But it was worse in a way I didn't know how to explain. Danica was lying on a pool lounger in a hotel robe, laughing at something outside the frame. Her head was tilted back. There was something so real in her expression, something I hadn't seen on her face in years. A man's arm rested lightly across her ankle. Rosalie tapped the photo with one nail. His name's Beckett. He owns a wine bar in Capitol Hill. I only found out because Danica mentioned him while drunk at my place once, forgot herself, then changed the subject so fast it raised flags. I stared at the arm. It was tanned, muscular, with a tattoo of a raven on the wrist. I'd seen that tattoo before. Danica had a coffee table book called Birds of Meaning that she kept turning to last fall. She said she was thinking of getting a raven inked on her shoulder. When I asked why, she just shrugged and said, "They're survivors." I thought she was talking about herself. I put the photo down. My hands were steady now. My heartbeat wasn't. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. Rosalie didn't flinch. "Because she never deserved you," she said plainly. "And because I'm sick of watching you apologize for loving her more than she'll ever love you back." I looked at her then, really looked, and something clicked in the silence between us. The way she shifted slightly when our eyes met. The way her hand lingered on the table, not quite close enough to touch mine. There was more to this. This wasn't just pity, or loyalty, or justice. It was personal. "You knew," I said quietly. "For how long?" She didn't answer, but her jaw tightened, and her eyes drifted toward the front window like she couldn't bear to hold my gaze any longer. "Since the night of your anniversary," she finally said. 2 years ago. She told me about someone she met at a hotel bar while you were upstairs ordering room service. That night, I remembered it. The champagne I chilled myself. The flowers I arranged. The dinner she skipped because she had a headache and wanted to rest. I brought up dessert on a tray. She never touched it. She said it didn't count, Rosalie added. Because it was only once. Because she didn't finish anything. Because she still loved you. The words landed like ash. Meaningless and light, but still choking. "She's been rewriting your marriage in her head for years," Rosalie said. "And every version of it ends with you staying." I sat back. I didn't know what to feel anymore. Grief? Rage? Gratitude? She reached across the table and gently pushed the envelope back toward me. "You need to decide," she said, "how much more of yourself you're willing to lose just to keep pretending she hasn't already left." Then she stood, walked out without waiting for a reply, and left me sitting there, surrounded by the proof I thought I never wanted, and the silence that had been growing in our home for far longer than I'd ever dared to admit. I didn't go home after the bookstore. I couldn't. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, past familiar intersections that didn't feel familiar anymore, past coffee shops where Danica used to make me pick up her overly complicated orders. 2 pumps of this, 1.5 of that. Oat milk only if it wasn't boxed. It used to annoy me. Now I realized it wasn't fussiness. It was control. Precision. She didn't like chaos. She preferred things clean, quiet, especially her lies. Eventually, I parked in a strip mall lot, windows cracked, heart racing. The envelope sat in the passenger seat like a live animal. It felt radioactive, like anyone who looked inside would walk away altered. I didn't even know what I wanted anymore. An apology? An explanation? A confession? But no, what I wanted wasn't emotional. Not anymore. I wanted leverage. I drove home just before noon. Danica's car was gone. Her calendar said Pilates plus grocery stop. I knew now that meant nothing. I opened the front door slowly, like the house might smell different. It didn't. It was still our home, but something in the walls had shifted. The silence was thicker now, the air heavier. I sat at her desk. Not mine, hers. The one in the guest room that had somehow become her workspace, though I hadn't seen her do a minute of actual work there in months. It was mostly makeup, hair tools, empty skincare bottles, and a drawer that was always locked. I had never touched it, but today I did. The lock was cheap. I used a thin screwdriver from the kitchen drawer, twisted gently, and it popped open with a quiet click. Inside was a leather notebook. Not a journal. A ledger. Each page was dated. Each entry organized. There were initials, cities, flight numbers. Sometimes prices. Sometimes strange acronyms I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it might be business expenses, but Danica didn't have a job that required travel. She hadn't in years. One name repeated, Beckett. Under it, once, in parentheses, was the word safe. Another entry, just 2 weeks old, listed a dollar amount, $4,300. Beneath it, transfer complete. He won't ask again. And then a strange line scribbled at the bottom of the page. If it breaks, don't panic. Smile. Cry. Play the victim. He won't press. I read that last line 5 times. It wasn't a journal. It was a script. I sat back, the breath punched out of my lungs. This wasn't just infidelity. This was strategy. Danica had rehearsed outcomes, predicted reactions. She had studied me, known exactly how far she could push before I folded in on myself. The worst part? She was right. I had never pressed. Not when she forgot anniversaries. Not when she came home late smelling like cologne I didn't wear. Not when she bought new clothes with tags still on them that I never once saw her wear around me. Not when she laughed at my insecurities in front of her friends. Not even when she stopped saying, "I love you," without being prompted. I had been quiet, gentle, predictable, exactly how she liked me. I stood and walked out of the guest room and down the hall into our bedroom. Her side of the closet was pristine, color-coded, seasonal. Mine looked like a dorm room by comparison. I opened her jewelry drawer, looked beneath the lining like I had once seen her do. Another envelope. Inside, 2 IDs. One with her real name, one with a different last name. Same photo, different hair color. Danica had told me she once dyed it blonde for fun, but now I wasn't sure it had anything to do with fun. There were receipts too. One for a storage unit on the other side of town. Another for a safety deposit box at a local credit union. One I didn't know existed. I sat on the edge of the bed, everything in my lap, and for the first time in days, I laughed. Not the good kind. The kind you laugh when the world tilts so far off its axis that you're convinced you've stepped out of your own life and into someone else's nightmare. Danica wasn't just hiding things. She was preparing for something. An exit. A disappearance. Or worse, a situation where I was the one left looking guilty while she walked away untouched. I placed everything back where I found it. Locked the drawer. Closed the closet. Left no fingerprints on anything I didn't want to answer for. I didn't say a word when she came home an hour later with 2 bags of groceries and a faint scratch on her neck she blamed on a rude bush in the Whole Foods parking lot. I just smiled and kissed her forehead and told her I was going to run out to the hardware store. She said, "Don't take too long." I said, "I won't." But I didn't go to the hardware store. I drove straight to the storage unit. And what I found behind that steel door changed everything. The storage facility was one of those modern, climate-controlled places with automatic lights that flicker on as you walk by, like the building itself is watching. The air smelled like cardboard, bleach, and silence. I stood in front of Unit 214, Danica's unit, holding the access code she had scribbled on a sticky note tucked into her fake ID envelope. 1379 #B. My hands were trembling as I punched it in. I'd never broken into anything in my life. Not a room, not a car, not even a secret. I was the guy who left passwords unchanged and believed locked drawers were about privacy, not deceit. But the lock clicked, and the door rolled up. At first, it looked like nothing. A stack of boxes, a standing mirror covered with a sheet, a suitcase, matte black, expensive-looking, wheels clean. A few articles of clothing hung neatly on a portable rack, all dark colors, no prints, no trace of the person I married. I opened the suitcase. Inside were 3 neatly folded outfits, a burner phone, a passport with a different last name, and a wad of cash thick enough to choke someone. Euros, American bills, a Canadian driver's license. She wasn't just having an affair. She was preparing to become someone else. In the corner of the suitcase was a notebook, smaller than the ledger I'd found in her desk. This one was leather-bound, with soft, worn edges, as if it had been opened 100 times. I flipped it open. The first page was a list of cities: Savannah, Austin, Vancouver, Marseille. Next to each was a series of numbers, bank account balances, I realized, separate from ours, none of which I knew existed. One had $12,400. Another had over $40,000. The second page was worse. If he pushes back, remind him of the pills. I froze. There were no pills. Or at least, none I knew about. She'd mentioned anxiety once, briefly, years ago. But that was it. The next line made it clear. He'll fold if you bring up the 2019 breakdown. Say you're worried. Cry if needed. You can spin it. My stomach flipped. The 2019 breakdown was mine. I'd had a panic attack at work. I came home shaking, couldn't breathe, thought I was dying. Danica held me, rubbed my back, told me I was safe. It was the only time in our marriage I ever felt truly vulnerable around her. She had stored it, weaponized it, planned to use it against me. I slammed the notebook shut, breath caught somewhere between a scream and a sob. This wasn't a love story gone stale. This was psychological warfare, rehearsed and refined behind a perfectly symmetrical smile. I rifled through the rest of the boxes. One was filled with framed photos of us, but all the glass was shattered. Intentionally, each crack like a roadmap of rage. Another box held printed emails, maybe 200 pages deep, some highlighted, some annotated. I only skimmed a few. They weren't hers. They were mine. Old emails to colleagues. Jokes I'd made. Complaints. Notes I wrote to myself. Emails I never deleted, but never shared, either. Somehow, she had accessed my entire inbox history. Printed it. Marked it. Cataloged it. There was a folder labeled, if legal. Inside were outlines of arguments, fake diary entries, even screenshots from our texts, cropped, edited, rearranged to look damning. One message I'd sent 2 years ago, "You make me feel invisible sometimes," was isolated, paired with one of her responses about safety and trauma, and captioned, "Pattern of emotional volatility." She was building a defense, or a narrative, or maybe both. I staggered out of the unit, locked it again with shaking hands, and sat in my car staring at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize the man looking back at me. He looked like someone who had believed in something soft, and found out it was made of knives. Danica wasn't cheating. She was escaping, and she had planned to do it in a way that left me broken, exposed, possibly ruined, financially, socially, even legally. This wasn't about Beckett, or Reese, or whoever came before or after. This was about control. But what she hadn't counted on was that I'd find all of it first. And now, I had the one thing she feared most. Time. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of rage, not even heartbreak. It was something deeper, the silence you feel when you finally stopped drowning and started breathing underwater instead. I spent the early morning hours sorting every piece of what I'd uncovered. The fake IDs, the burner phone, the notebook, the photos Rosalie had given me, the forged narratives, the empty bank trail Danica never thought I'd be smart enough to trace. I organized it all like evidence in a trial, except the court was just me. And for the first time in years, I was the one in control. I didn't call her out that morning. I made her coffee, kissed her forehead. I told her she looked rested. She beamed, proud of her glow. She mentioned she was meeting a friend from Pilates that afternoon and would be home late. I smiled and nodded and watched her leave like I always did. Except this time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt like a storm inside a suit. The first thing I did was meet with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. Someone I had been referred to through a quiet friend of Rosalie's, a divorce attorney who specialized in high-conflict separation with a background in digital forensics. By 11 a.m., I had secured legal protections. By 2 p.m., my accounts were separated, my name removed from anything that could be used as collateral, and 2 private investigators had copies of everything I'd found. Danica didn't know I had moved first. That night, when she came home with windblown hair and cheeks too flushed for spring, I greeted her the same. We watched TV. She commented on my sudden calmness. "You're being sweet lately," she said, curling against me like nothing had ever happened. "I missed this version of you." I kissed her hair and said, "He's been here all along. You just stopped looking." She didn't know I'd already filed. Didn't know I'd frozen our shared assets. Didn't know I'd left a certified envelope on her pillow, time for the morning after she thought she'd be flying to Vancouver. It was all waiting. The next day, she woke up to a letter from me. Not angry, not bitter, just clear. Inside was everything. Every photo, every receipt, a breakdown of her off-book accounts, a list of names, dates, times, cross-referenced, footnoted, indexed like a final project. At the bottom, a single paragraph. "I know everything. I loved you for longer than you deserved, and I will not hate you now, because that would mean carrying you with me forever. I am setting you down here. Quietly. Permanently." She didn't text. She didn't call. She disappeared for 4 days. When she finally resurfaced, it was through her lawyer. They tried to contest the financials. They tried to pivot to mental health. But I had already documented everything, and I had done it without her ever seeing the storm coming. By the end of the month, it was over, and I was free. It wasn't the kind of freedom that comes with champagne or cheering or standing on a mountaintop. It was quieter, deeper, like walking into your own home after someone else had been living in it for years and realizing all the lights finally work again. Rosalie checked in once, through a single text. You did it. You okay? I typed and deleted 6 versions of a reply, then finally wrote back. I'm starting over. And this time, I'll choose peace before performance. And that was it. No revenge. No war. Just a man, betrayed and buried, who found a way to climb out without burning the world around him. Because sometimes, the best ending isn't vengeance. It's clarity, and walking away whole while they're still standing in the ruins of their own making.